if you're an unbeliever, here's some things you should expect. You should expect to be welcomed,
Mm-hmm.
right? You should expect to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
You should expect that people will come up and talk to you and engage with you and ask you how you're doing. And you should expect to be invited to family homes for dinners and things like that. And you should expect all of that. But you should also expect to be told that you're a sinner who needs to repent from your sins and come to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that until that takes place, you actually don't belong. Production, Mormon producers, and
Greetings from the WatchWell Podcast. My name is Parker, and I'm one of the hosts. We have a few housekeeping things that we want to go over. If you are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts, there are 5 stars at the top of your or our podcast window. If you could go and rate our podcast, it helps the algorithm push us to more people, and that would be greatly appreciated. If you're viewing this on YouTube, we want you to remember that the subscribe button, the notification bell, and any like buttons on the videos are free, completely free to you. If it gives value to you and you appreciate the content, please help guide us in creating more and more of the content that you think is valuable. And you do that by telling us what's good and what's bad. So whether that is leaving a comment or liking the videos, we really appreciate it. We also want you guys to know how to find us and where we communicate information. That's on Facebook and Instagram. Head on over, follow us, give us a like. You can comment there too. We want you guys to be a part of the conversation. And you best do that by commenting on the Facebook page, getting involved in dialogue, and furthering the discussion about the gospel message. And that's what we want to do, is we want to create good discourse here at the WatchWell Podcast. And we really, really hope that you guys join us in viewing stories through the lens of truth. Now, on to the episode. All right, welcome to the WatchWell Podcast. My name is Parker, and this is my co-host, Nick. Nick, we are going to be navigating the question, does Home Alone teach us something about the Bible?
Or can it?
Or can it?
Can it teach us something about the Bible?
So we'll ponder that a little bit later. How was your week?
Great week. Today I'm dragging a little bit. So I got my coffee right here with me.
What are you drinking? What kind of coffee?
It's just coffee.
Just coffee.
Just regular coffee. I've got a little bit of creamer in it.
Yeah, we gotta get some Black Rifle over there for you.
Yeah. Sponsorship?
Maybe? Yeah, maybe.
No,
yeah. Check us out, Black Rifle.
Yeah. So yeah, dragging a little bit. Overall, doing good. Ready to answer that question. Ready to talk about that. Yeah. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Church was busy today, 2 services, and we had a meeting afterwards. So very similar morning. I'm actually feeling pretty good today, though. Got a lot of stuff to do.
Were you at both services?
Yeah, we went to both services. Yeah, it's just really good. Yeah, I'm ready for the podcast. I got some work I got to do later, so do the fun part now with the podcast, and then do the work later. It's kind of that's the motto, right?
Yeah.
So, Home Alone, did you like it? Are you brave enough to say you didn't?
Oh no, not at all. This is one of those movies for me. It's like the ultimate nostalgia, like moment. Because I was 3 years old when it came out, and I couldn't even count how many times I've seen this movie throughout my life.
Right.
So
it's been a lot.
I love it. One other thing.
Okay.
So you and I talked.
Yeah.
And we're planning on doing Die Hard in this series of Christmas movies, right?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. So I think Home Alone is the key to solving and resolving the debate of whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie.
Okay.
You want to know why?
That's a bold statement. I really do.
Very, very, it's a very simple thing, and it's probably really stupid, but
go ahead.
I'm going to say it anyway.
Go for it.
Home Alone is a copy of Die Hard, and Home Alone is a Christmas movie.
Oh, interesting. So, we should have all of the people listening jump in on the comments on their opinions on whether or not Die Hard is similar to Home Alone and how it is similar, and then what makes one a Christmas movie over the other. We
Right.
should start that discussion. I think
Yeah.
that's pretty fun.
Unless you just want to say that the thing that makes Home Alone a Christmas movie is the Christmas music.
Yeah, or that it just happens around Christmas.
Right,
But
but Die Hard does
there's
too.
Christmas music
So
in Die Hard as well. So
there you go. Yeah.
um,
If Home Alone's a Christmas movie, Die Hard is too.
I agree. I tend to agree.
So there we go.
So before we get started, I do have a question for you, Nick. In the sense of doing Home Alone and reviewing Home Alone through the lens of truth, we do have to ask ourselves the question: have you ever been left home alone when you were a kid?
You mean like forgotten?
Just
Like he
forgotten,
was
just
in the movie?
completely forgotten. Yeah,
No.
you weren't. I don't think
No.
at least to my knowledge. Now, if my
Yeah.
parents end up listening to this, we're gonna have some conversations on if you ever did, because I'd like to know. I'd like to know. But I don't know. At least they've never told me. Which, if I left Ronan, my son, at home, I don't know if I'd ever tell him either. So, had to ask. I don't know if you ever
Yeah.
were. Have you ever left your kids at home alone?
No.
Just
I mean,
completely forgot. Maybe think
no.
Katie had them and just left.
Nope.
Never.
Nope. Nothing like that.
I guess that
Not
makes us
done it.
good parents.
Yeah.
If our parents have, I guess that makes us good parents.
I hope so.
Yeah.
We did. We were foster parents for a while,
Okay.
and we didn't leave. We didn't leave anyone. We didn't forget anybody.
You
we didn't.
can't-
Nothing like that.
Well, that one's a little bit harder to forget.
Yeah, we didn't forget anybody,
If
but we
harder is a thing.
were walking in a parade. It was I don't even know what the parade was for. It was over the summer. It was like a town parade, and we were throwing candy, and one of our foster daughters was near us walking throwing candy, and we turned around and she wasn't there anymore.
Uh-oh.
And so what happened was she was throwing candy, but then she saw the candy on the ground and started to pick it up. And she stopped and got behind the rest of the
Yeah.
parade. And so we're frantically looking like we just became foster parents. What are we going to do about this? Like we're going to lose our foster license. We're not going to be able to do any. And so like, panicking in that moment, but she was standing next to a police officer and just waiting. So, it worked out, but that was kind of a panic moment. But no, we've never like forgotten anybody or left anyone at home or anything like that.
Yeah. Cool. So let's get into some of the ratings. I'm interested to see some of
Okay.
these ratings. Let's see if we agree with them. Let me pull it up here. Make sure that we have the right one. We've had some technical difficulties this morning, so we're a little out of whack here. But okay. Common Sense Media.
Yeah.
Age 10 and up. What do you think, Nick? What's your initial thoughts?
I think that's probably playing it a little too safe.
A little too safe?
That's putting it really high. Yeah.
I tend to
So
agree.
I think
yeah.
Yeah. And then we have the parents and kids recommendation too. And what is that, 8 and 9?
Yep, you got it. Parents say 9
Yeah.
plus, kids say 8 plus. It's interesting. I'd like to know a little bit more about how the kids, how they ask, like how Common Sense Media asks the kids and how that plays out, because are kids just going off of what their parents allow them to do? So like how, with the answering, how are kids going to rate a movie that they're not allowed to see? If they're saying 8 plus, then
Right.
I wonder how that works.
Yeah, and I don't know their method of gathering that stuff. Unless it's just members of the site somehow. Maybe they get surveys or something.
Maybe.
Yeah, I don't know.
So let's go ahead and do an overview, Nick, for us, and we'll get started.
Yeah, so I think this movie is what 30.
It's old.
This movie 32 years old.
Classic.
This movie is 32 years old. So if you haven't seen it,
go watch it.
Go watch it. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it by now. So yeah, that's the premise, is that Kevin McAllister wishes that he would wake up and his family would be gone, and in a way he gets his wish that he and we'll probably talk more about specific scenes, but just that's the overarching idea right there. That his family is there's conflict to start the movie between Kevin and his family. He's getting in trouble and all of that stuff. And he says, "I wish I didn't have a family at all. I wish you would all just disappear." And then they leave for a vacation, flying overseas to France, and they think that they have Kevin, but they don't have Kevin. They miscounted, or they counted a neighbor boy that wasn't actually going with them. And then Kevin wakes up and his family has already left. So he thinks his wish made his family disappear. So
Yeah,
that is, and then we have Joe Pesci, and I don't remember the other actor's name,
I don't
but
either.
Marv. The character's name is Marv, and they are robbers. They are there scouting out the neighborhood to um, to rob all of the houses that families are gone on vacation for Christmas. And Kevin is an 8-year-old boy left home alone in this situation.
Right.
Anything to add?
I don't. That's pretty good. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about the movie review.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I really am.
So I don't know if we want to jump in already, but that brings us. People have already seen it, so I don't know that we really need to. I'm assuming people have seen it, so I don't
Right,
really
right, right.
think we need to do like a rundown of characters or anything like that, really.
No.
But what what sticks out? What's most memorable? Like not even like talking about lessons yet, but what is most memorable about this movie for you?
I would say that the iconic, like him waking up and
Yeah,
just the iconic
yeah,
Macaulay Culkin with the screaming and just the very quotable iconic scenes is what sticks out
yeah,
to me. So that's what I
yeah.
would say. What about you?
For me, it's when so the robbers have finally made it into the house, and Kevin is running up to the attic, and then Marv dives over a string, grabs Kevin's leg as he's trying to get up the steps, and Kevin sees the tarantula, his brother's pet spider, picks it up and puts it on Marv's face, and the blood curdling scream that comes from Marv when that spider's on his face. That's probably the most memorable thing for me. It's like I don't know that there's ever been a more convincing scream in all of film history. Like it's just this blood curdling, terrified moment because the spider's on his face, and it's hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, I'm on the wrong scene here, but okay, we're back. Good.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, I think the spider scene's good. I like it when the iron falls down the laundry chute and
Yeah.
smacks him in the face. I
And
mean, when he's stepping on him.
nobody would survive even one of those
No,
things.
not at all, not at all.
Yeah.
Um, that's good stuff. It's a lot of fun. Let's see. So back to the question: does
Hmm.
Home Alone teach us something about the Bible?
Yeah. So I will say you can use it to teach something about the Bible. The movie on its own, watching it for entertainment, probably doesn't do that. But when you view it, when you've given over the way you see the world to Jesus, to Christ, and He is now the lens that you see things through. The Bible is your worldview. Then, of course, it can,
Right.
because we can look through that lens. Um, and so one of the things, I'll just throw out there at first is um, the movie has a big component is family, right?
Mm-hmm.
Does the Bible have anything to say about family?
A lot to say about family.
Right. Another component is um, um, theft, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have robbers. Does the Bible have anything to say about theft?
Few things.
Yeah. So there's all of these things that the movie's just throwing in there as entertainment, but that if we look at those through through our lens, that it's going to direct us to Scripture. And the premise of the movie is that Kevin wants his family gone because he's getting in trouble all the time. And if we were to, I'm going to turn there now, turn to the book of Ephesians. I was in the wrong spot just a second ago, so excuse me while I turn. But we touched on this when we did the fences episode, but Ephesians chapter 6, verse 1, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with the promise that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. How do you feel Kevin, as an 8-year-old boy, is doing with that instruction right there?
Not well. I mean, that's the obvious answer, is not well.
Yeah.
I think that he struggles. I think it's very relatable, at least the character arc, because, I mean, how many brothers does he have? And he's what, the youngest?
Right.
So I think that, or at least one of the youngest. So I think that it's very, very interesting to, or at least it's relatable to other people because, young kids of older brothers and older siblings, where, even in the movie, it seems like everybody's got their own thing going on, and Kevin just doesn't understand where he fits. Where do I fit? I'm young. I'm too young to do certain things. I want to be my own person. I'm always getting in trouble. He needs to he needs to heed his parents' advice and obey his parents, but the reasons why he doesn't, I think, are very relatable and very real.
And he's bitter because it seems like he's always getting in trouble because of other people.
Yes. Yeah.
Especially that big scene, that big moment at the beginning of the movie or near the beginning where Buzz eats all the cheese pizza on purpose, right?
Right.
And then he shoves it in his mouth and is like showing off to Kevin, hey, I just ate your pizza. What are you going to do about it? Right. And he's being provoked all the time. He's got, which is, I mean, it's what older siblings do.
Mm-hmm.
Did you? I mean,
I absolutely did it.
You're the oldest.
Absolutely.
Did you do any of that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah. So I mean, even though it's what older siblings do, he's obviously bitter and angry about it, and that's causing more and more frustration to build. And it's like these outbursts are happening because of it.
Yeah, and I think
his disobedience, his disrespect to his mom. His disrespect to his dad, even, it talks about he used his fishing lures to make Christmas ornaments or something like that. That's one of the scenes. So yeah, I mean, it's just seems like it's all bitterness because he's constantly in trouble because of other people.
So
he sees it that way.
He sees it that way, but is he wrong to see it that way? Let's start unpacking this, because I think we can use this if we definitely use our presuppositions to view this through a certain lens and view it through our faith. We can look at this as a Kevin problem, an older sibling problem, and a parent problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I guess I would ask you, is he wrong with everything that we know, understanding everything we know about Kevin and why he is feeling the way that he's feeling, leading to his disobedience? His disobedience isn't justified, but are his feelings justified? Is there an unjust, is there something that is going against Kevin that is justified in he's justified in his feelings?
Well, I mean, I think you could look at that pizza scene again and just answer whose fault was it?
Because I would say it would be the older brother's fault.
Yeah, it's Buzz's fault.
Yeah,
but at the same time, Kevin does push him.
But from a parental perspective, coming in and seeing something like that, you can't, as a parent, you can't just, take one side or the other. You need to get to the bottom of what the issue is and then deliver justice, as we're called as parents to deliver justice. Not even just parents, just people in authority. So you really have to get to the bottom of things in truth, and it makes it difficult for parents. And I think a lot of parents are excited about vacations, or they've got other things going on at work, or relationship stuff between spouses. And it's just, I don't want to deal with that. You're the one being noisy, and it just happens that the noisy one is the youngest. You're the problem.
Right. Yeah.
Don't
Yeah.
bother me. And
Right.
I think
And
that
in
we should look
reality,
at that we should look at that, and we should really examine as parents specifically, and even just any other authority. Like I said before, we really need to, because if we start to degrade truth and what justice truly is from a biblical perspective by just pushing it off onto the one that's making the most noise because we don't want to deal with it, then our kids start to do that because they learn from us, whether we like it or not. So go ahead and you can kind of jump on that a little bit. I want to hear your thoughts because I think it's important to look at that from the whole spectrum of, or I guess wholesomely, so that we can do a good job examining that kind of analogy, I guess.
yeah. So the way the movie sets it up, Kevin is it's more than understandable that Kevin would feel hated
Yes.
by everyone in the room, every member of his family, his parents, everybody. He's bullied by every one of his siblings. I mean, the way they set it up, I think I can't remember what the middle brother says something about him. The sister says you are what the French called la incompetent, like you're incompetent. You can't do this on. You can't pack your own suitcase. And then straight up to Buzz eating the pizza, bullying him, and then to the uncle who stands up after all of it and says, "Look what you did, you little jerk!" Right? Like, which is kind of ironic because who's actually the jerk?
Right. Exactly.
The uncle is being the jerk,
Right.
right? Right? I mean, he's the one. He's the adult. He should be able to have self control, and handle that situation well. And um, and they don't. So I
No.
think Kevin is more than it's more than understandable that he would feel hated, that he would feel not valued at all, that he would feel
Worthless.
like worthless.
Worthless.
Yeah, and when people treat you that way, you're gonna be like, I wish you were gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna have that. It's like this big blow up, and a lot of parents probably watch Home Alone and say, "Man, Kevin is just so disrespectful. I can't believe he talks like that to his parents." But the movie also kind of paints the picture that his parents don't do anything to help him, to protect him, to discipline. Like they're just kind of there.
Yeah. Or even to discipline and teach him why they're disciplining. It's just, you know, it's like, don't do that, whatever that is. Well,
Hmm.
explaining the why would be helpful as a parent to get your kid to understand, maybe it leads to some type of pain, whether it be physical, emotional, whatever. Maybe you want to teach your kid that decisions like that are could lead to bigger issues. I mean, I understand that, like, Exodus, what is it, 2012 that you just cited,
Hmm.
honor the father and mother, like, there is no exception. So yes, obedience at the end of the day, obedience is required. It's not an option, but I think that there's good and bad ways to go about it. So
And the parents aren't without responsibility in that too.
absolutely,
The
yeah,
parents are
100%.
not. So as a parent, you have a responsibility to be honorable,
Yeah, you do.
right?
Yep,
So it tells children to honor your father and your mother. Well, parent, make sure that you're making it as easy as possible for your child to honor you,
absolutely. Yep, that's good
right?
stuff, man.
You're being
Hmm.
an honorable person. I mean, but to go back to Ephesians, and again, this might be repetitive with our fences episode, but I mean, it is what it is. But
That was almost a year ago,
it was almost a year
so
ago. It's
I think
crazy.
it's worth bringing up again.
Yeah. So, you know, like it said here, honor your father and your mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you. Um, sorry, that it may go well with you and that you may live long in the land. And then verse 4 says, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." And that is absolutely missing in the McAllister household.
Absolutely. Yep. 100%.
So
You're correct.
sure, Kevin is disrespectful and he doesn't honor his parents. He doesn't honor what they say. He comes around to it because he
Hmm.
misses them when they're gone. And but it's that aspect of things is completely absent. There's not discipline. There's not teaching. There's not instruction. There's just, you did something wrong. Get out of my sight.
And when you remove all of that, why is it wrong? Like, why is what I'm doing wrong? If
You
there's
mean
no,
from the kid's
from the
perspective?
kid's perspective, yeah,
Yeah.
from Kevin's perspective, if dad or mom or the union or the spouse togetherness is teaching the children why something is wrong according to the Bible, then there's a standard by which it is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
If you remove all of that, well, I'm no different than any, what's why shouldn't I annoy my brother and cause
Mm-hmm.
why is Kevin's uh I guess wants in those situations when he's being loud or his feelings or whatever any less valued than mom's or dad's wanting to not be annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's also really important to note, that it goes both ways. The
Yeah.
intellectual argument goes both ways.
So you're a parent. I'm a parent. Um, we don't have the number of kids that the McAllisters do in Home Alone, but so let's say you put yourself in, you're Kevin's dad,
Okay.
which makes you Buzz's dad. I don't know his other brother's name or his sister's name. Um, and this all happens, like the pizza thing
Okay.
happens. Kevin pushes him, knocks over the milk. Your brother says, "Look what you did, you little jerk." You're the dad. It's your house. What do you do?
Well, I would get them. Well, I think that's kind of a loaded question, to be honest. I'll give you my
Mm-hmm.
answer, but I think that part of the problem. So I think we're seeing symptoms of a bigger issue, because there
Okay.
is no biblical foundation to the kids growing up. That stuff that stuff is bubbling up to the surface
Mm-hmm.
to a degree, because kids are always going to be kids, right?
Yeah.
But to just at a surface level face value answer, I would go to them, instead of yelling or screaming or just punishing the loudest, youngest kid, whatever it may be. I would deliver the punishment appropriate to the crimes, is what I would try to assess the best I could in that situation, having not seen it. So I would go and I would demand honesty, and then I would deliver the punishments according to, okay, Kevin, you shoved your brother. That's not allowed in this house. You're going to get this punishment, whatever that punishment would be. Hey, older brother, you have a little bit bigger of a punishment because you're the older brother. You have a little bit more responsibility in the situation, and I want to help develop your maturity so that this doesn't happen again. You might get a little bit bigger of a punishment than younger brother, because younger brother looks up to you. You have a higher degree of responsibility in those situations. You need to be a leader. These kinds of things. That would be kind of the surface level thought process and how I would deliver that, because then
Mm-hmm.
the consequences are not equal, but they are fair, because each kid needs to learn the lessons that they need to learn, and they're not always equal. You need to
Mm-hmm.
meet them where they are, and you need to essentially teach them that, hey, dad's delivering a punishment that is true, and according to, like, true justice is really what it is. One person's just not going to get punished, and the other one's going to got off scotch free, because
Mm-hmm.
there are probably multiple wrongs happening, and we need to teach our kids and bring them up in the we need to practice what we preach, essentially, is what I'm saying. We need
Yeah.
to punish the wrong things and praise the right things all the time as
Yeah.
parents, so that we can train our kids to avoid the bad things and celebrate the good things, so that they because all of that adds up to good decision making. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Those are some
Yeah.
of my superficial thoughts without any more depth, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's I think it's really good to point out that there's an absence of any type of foundation. That there's an absence of this event, this movie, the conflict in the family, isn't just isolated to this moment,
Right. It's
right?
not.
There's things that have been bubbling up underneath the surface that are likely there, and if it were real, there would definitely be things bubbling up under the surface. And
Because what if
for-
Kevin's dad goes in to handle that situation and they don't respect him? Well, why? Do they understand that
Mhm,
there's authority in being a father by the Bible? Like,
right.
these are things that you teach your children about authority, that God gives authority, and we want to raise our kids to honor God, and if they're going to honor God, they're going to honor their parents. But then that also teaches young kids that parents need to be honorable. And if you lose
Hmm.
that foundation at a young age, then well, I don't. Then you know, anything is possible at that point because there's no grounding.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And one thing that kind of sticks out to me in the movie is um, what is what is dad even doing?
yeah, does it mention his job?
No, it doesn't mention his job. He's obviously wealthy and successful. It doesn't say what he does, but I mean, I'm talking like every time something happens with the kids and there's a response necessary, who's the one leading the charge? Mom.
Right,
And that's not to say that moms shouldn't discipline their kids, but dad's basically absent in the whole thing. Like, who's the one desperately fighting to get back home because they realize their son's alone?
mom.
Mom.
Right,
Who's the one who's trying to discipline Kevin on her own? Mom. Like, what is Kevin's dad even doing? And it's his brother, the one that called his son a jerk. Like, are you in his house? What's he doing? What's he even doing?
right. That's a very
He's
good point. That's a very good point.
and moms have authority too. I'm not saying she shouldn't be disciplining him,
Right,
but when things reach a certain point, that is the role of a father to step in and when all of this chaos is happening, to bring order.
right.
You have all of this going on. Milk is on the ground, pizza's been vomited up, kids just pushed another kid, and it's dad's job to step in and give and provide order in that to take all of that and organize it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
to and in doing so, not don't bring hatred upon yourself, don't provoke to more anger, don't provoke to more chaos. When you bring order to that, it actually brings peace to the situation, and then you can resolve it. You can actually have a real resolution, and that's the job of a father to step in and do,
Hmm.
especially if he's able. There are families that's not possible, and I understand that, um, and that's why it's so difficult in those families a lot of the time. But that is the role of a dad to step in, and in this movie, I mean, maybe it's because he's gone all the time for work, because a lot of successful people are
Yeah,
like that,
maybe that it is,
and
but
he's
it's
just
still
not
not
used to it.
it's still
But
not an
he's
excuse.
not there. He's absent.
Yeah, he is, but it's still not an excuse.
Right.
Work is not an excuse to be absent with your family.
Mhm.
It's just a necessary reason to be absent. But when you come home, you need to be a part of your kids' lives. You need to be a support system for your wife. You need to, be actively involved in the discipline teaching and instructing of your kids, as you started off talking about.
Mhm.
Or else
For sure.
or else your worth as a father becomes what you make monetarily.
Yeah.
And I think that for fathers, and when you talk about God's design for the family and how important the family is, as we started the podcast off talking about, you said that this movie has a lot to do with family. The Bible talks a lot about family, Christian household, different things like that.
Mhm.
God wanted and God created a father to be more than just dollar bills that come into the home.
Mhm.
So that's a great point that I think that is worth putting out there,
Yeah.
because he's definitely failing on the father level. He's a paycheck. That's it.
Yeah.
Is what the movie depicts.
Yeah.
So
Sure. I mean, yeah, and when he's worried when they see that Kevin is missing, and I don't recall a scene where but he's not the one.
leading the charge.
Yeah, he's not, like,
Yeah.
ignoring it at all, but he's not doing everything he can, right? And maybe it's because he's in the background, maybe he's just caring for everyone else, and maybe that's what's happening, but, based on the way the things happen earlier in the movie, it just doesn't seem like that's the guy he is.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up because it's the exact opposite of what God does for us.
Mhm.
it's there was a rift due to the fall, and then God, as and I'm not saying that God's a man or a woman or anything like that. I'm just saying that he actively pursues the redemptive uh path for us as humans.
Hmm.
Actively pursues it. And in this movie, you don't actually see the figurehead, the father of, the figurehead of the family, actively pursuing the safety of his son.
Right.
So it's just
Not
interesting.
even, and not just when his son is home alone and they've left him and flying. They've flown. I told you I'm dragging. I told you I'm dragging. They've flown over the Atlantic Ocean. They're
Right,
to
right.
Europe or wherever they're going, France, and not even only that, but before they ever left, when his own brother called his son a jerk, does nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think, I mean, and this may be controversial, but that's probably pretty normal for most families.
Could be, yeah,
So that would be the charge, that if you're a dad out there listening, and the Bible calls you to a higher standard. The Bible calls you to lead your family, teach, instruct your family, and protect your kids, even if it's against your brothers, your parents, whoever. You are their safety. Um,
right.
so I would just I would encourage you to fully step into that authority, into that role in your family, for the betterment of it. It's help lead your wife, be there for her too, and kind of like what Nick was talking about earlier, is if there's a chaos going on, be the one to organize it in a way that you can attack it and be triumphant as a family.
For sure.
So all right, what else do we got, Nick?
Excuse me. So a little bit later in the movie, just before man, what are their Marv and what's Joe Pesci's character's name?
Marv
Marv and
and oh man, we always forget names. We got to do a
I
better job
know.
at remembering names.
I would have known if I didn't. Oh well, it doesn't matter.
It
The
doesn't
two
matter.
robbers, the
Two
two
robbers.
thieves.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, the wet bandits
Yeah, yeah,
as they want to
yeah.
as
Because they're
Marv wants to be
they're
called.
flooding all the homes.
Yeah.
It's
um.
it is a funny movie, I will say. The
Yeah.
comedy is really
It's
good, and it's clean, so
yeah.
you can enjoy it. Yeah.
Mine is clean minus when Kevin's going through Buzz's
Oh,
stuff
right. Yeah,
and there's a
absolutely.
Playboy magazine.
And I wonder if
You
that's where
don't
the
see
ratings
anything,
come from.
but
Actually,
you see the cover.
now that we think about it, I wonder if that's where the ratings come from.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe the whatever. But anyway, the two robbers.
Yeah. So before they're coming to the house, so this is before all of like the pranks and stunts and all of that stuff. When all the things that would have killed each one of them would have killed any normal human being, but somehow these thieves are making it through every single one. Paint cans to the face, falling down the steps, fire on the head, um, falling from the zip line as they're trying to get over to the house, stepping on the nail in the basement, all of those things. Any one of those things, could have. I mean, the nail wouldn't have killed anybody, but the paint cans for sure would have broken their skulls and done some damage. And they seem to be fine. So right before they get into that part of the movie, Kevin's sitting in the church, and there's like the kids are on stage doing like, I don't know if it's a rehearsal or if it's the actual play
Mm-hmm.
or performance, but they're singing songs, and he sits the old man that Kevin thinks is a serial killer
Right.
basically comes and sits right next to him,
Mm-hmm.
and then they start to talk. Right? How would you? And do you know what I'm talking about? Do you remember what I'm talking
Yeah.
about?
Keep talking about it to help me remember.
Okay, so it's in the church. They sit down. The old man starts to talk about his family
Mm-hmm.
and how he's separated from his son and hasn't talked to his son, and he's actually here in the church because his granddaughter is on stage and he never gets to see her. So he came in and he sat down in the pew, and then Kevin ends up giving an advice. You should just call your son. You should just call him. It's the holidays. People love and I'm sure your granddaughter would love the presents, right? That you have that. Um, and so where I'm going with that is so many Christians neglect the value and importance of encouragement from other Christians.
Mm.
So many Christians, and one way that really shows itself is neglecting to gather with the body of believers on Sunday for church services.
Wow, that's interesting.
And
Yeah.
so Hebrews 10:25, actually I'll start in 24. Um, Actually I'll start in 23. There's a lot of good stuff here, but
It's
let
actually
us hold
really
fast.
sorry,
Do what?
go ahead. Go ahead. I'll talk after, but go ahead.
Okay. Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So, the writer of Hebrews is encouraging, exhorting Christians to not abandon gathering together. He's saying, here are some people, here are some Christians who think they can do it alone. They think they can just be by themselves. One of the memes that I see often is, I think, worship is for church, but worship is for 3 a.m. car rides and things like that. And sure, that's true, but there's something special and unique about gathering with other believers in church. When you come together, church in the Bible, it's talking about the assembly, the gathering of believers to worship together and encourage one another. That's exactly what church is. And so we'll say things like, that a lot of, for a long time, travel baseball games happen on Sundays. And we'll say things like, in an effort to justify ourselves, we'll say things like, well, I can worship God on the baseball field, or I can minister to the people around me while I skip church to go to this travel game on Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
And I can do all that. And I can miss 6 weeks of Sundays in a row because that's the baseball season, and I'll just minister while I'm there. So on one hand, okay, if that's true, which it's partially true, but if that's true, are you doing that?
Right. I mean, that's a good
Are,
question.
are you
Yeah.
are you there actually ministering, sharing the gospel with the people that are there, with the unbelievers who are there on your kids' travel baseball team or whatever sport it is? It could be anything,
Right.
or it could be any event. Are you actually doing that? So that's one aspect of that. Are you? So you say this is your justification. Are you actually following through and doing that? But again, yeah, you worship God when you're on the baseball field. You worship God when you're watching and cheering on your kid when they're doing something they love. That is an act of worship, but it's not church. It's not the gathering of believers together to as one body to lift praises to God and encourage one another and pray for one another and help each other in their daily lives. That's what church is supposed to be about.
Mm-hmm.
And the writer of Hebrews is saying some people neglect this. Some people are okay without this. They think they're okay without it. Don't abandon it
Right.
because it's valuable and it's important. And I think that scene with Kevin and the older gentleman um, is an example of why this is so important. Because here's an old man speaking to a younger man or a younger kid. I mean, and obviously the movie doesn't say that they're Christians or anything like that, but they're sitting in a church building, right? They're sitting in a church, encouraging one another through the problems that they're experiencing in their life and giving advice and counsel on how to resolve these issues that they see before them, that they're encountering and experiencing in their everyday life. And that's exactly what church is supposed to be.
Right.
We should gather together to sing, we should gather together to learn, and we should gather together to pray for one another. We should gather together to counsel one another through issues.
I would say
And
I think we need to, so knowing where we are in today's time and um let's see, organizing here. So with the past 2 or 3 years with COVID, I think we have to
Mhm.
even be more specific in our language when we talk about this, because right now we're seeing Zooms, where you just you stay at home, you get on Zoom or Skype or whatever, FaceTime, and you do a Bible study, um, and then you write that off as, well, back in the Bible days they did house church.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, but they were still together in the same location.
Mm-hmm.
This is not through. It wasn't through electronics, And I think it's actually. I was laughing as you kind of were talking there in my own head, and what I was going to say earlier was that it's funny that you brought that up because these aren't planned. I didn't know that you were going to say that, but today at church we talked about that.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my buddy Adam. Shout out to Adam Sorgi. We were talking about with COVID, people are just scared to jump back in, and they have been for a while. And I think for the majority of people, it's been back to normal for a little while. But there are still people that are writing things off that I don't have to be at church anymore. I can just either sit at home and watch it on TV, like watch it on my TV, log in and see the eCampus, and all of those things are great. Technology is there to make us convenient. But one of the things that I brought up in that conversation with Adam was, I heard a quote from somebody, and I'm not going to remember who it was for, but to give them credit for it. But they said that an online church gathering is like a marriage where one of the spouses never comes home. You're missing all of the love, you're missing all of the community, you're missing everything that is actually in the same room, the either the physical touch with hugging or being in each other's presence, whatever that is. And it's just one extra barrier, and
Mm-hmm.
it seems to be a slippery slope to me, to keep justifying things in that manner. So I don't know. I just thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's good.
So pretty
So
much go back to church if you're still worried about being sick and all of this. I'm sure that churches, even if you go back and you're still skeptical and you want to wear a mask or something, go back. Just get back involved with other believers, because nobody's really being affected by it anymore.
yeah,
It's pretty much over.
yeah,
We need to get out of this fear mentality of we're going to lose our lives, because even if I'm not saying be stupid with your life, obviously, but with everything that's come out about COVID and illnesses like that I don't know, just what we've been dealing with, it's ridiculous to not actually get back into church.
yeah. I don't actually think, and I might be wrong, and I might just be pessimistic, but I don't think fear is the primary thing.
You think it's convenience?
I think it's comfort and it's convenience and it's a lack of value placed on what church is. And some of that, not all of it, but some of that is because of the way that we do church in America, right? Some of that is a direct result of how church functions. And other parts of that are a direct result of people um, not valuing what church is supposed to be in a biblical manner at all.
Well, here, let me
So,
stop you there. Let's unpack that a little bit.
okay.
From your experience, how do you see the Western church functioning?
Well, in a lot of ways, it functions like an event, like an organization structuring an event rather than structuring a family gathering.
So what would
So,
you so break that down for me further?
so if we look at Scripture,
Mm-hmm.
church looks more like a Thanksgiving dinner among family members than it does a organization hosting a massive concert.
So what would be your charge? Would your charge be to push it back into the homes?
No, not necessarily into the homes. What it's more an attitude, and it's more a principle than it is, okay, now everyone go back to home church. It's so it comes back down to the fundamental question, what is church? Okay? What is it? You can't mutually encourage each other if you hear from one person all the time. You can't mutually encourage each other if you don't know what other people's struggles are. what happens around a table? People talk. People talk about what's going on in their life. People are sharing a meal together. They talk about problems, successes, and things like that. That needs to be incorporated somehow into church. And one of the ways
So
that would be incorporated is people asking for prayer, actually having space to ask people to pray for them. Where James says, if you're sick, go to the elders and have them pray for you, because the prayer of a righteous man is powerful and effective.
right, and
Right.
I'm not disagreeing with any of that. How do you so what you just explained is pretty much the modern day life group. How do
In
you
a way, yeah.
how so have you experienced churches that don't have that?
Yes, but again, if that's the way, if Sunday is a concert um and life group is church, then Sunday is not a church.
But can it have multiple functions? Can't you it's hard to do both, but can you at least try? And if you do try,
Sure.
I guess your charge would be, err on the side of the Sunday morning Thanksgiving meal kind of thing, right? Was that what you be
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah, and so keep in mind, I'm not being literal,
Right, right. Understood. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
I
not
don't
saying
wanna
gather around
yeah,
a table.
right.
I'm
You're
saying
saying
the
the essence
purpose.
of it. Yeah, the essence.
Right. The whole point of the church. Okay. What brings you into the church? It is that you have been adopted into the family of God.
Well, not always, but majority of the time that like so you mean like the church as in you're born again at that point.
Yes, I
Like
think there's
you're
no
a
distinction. I think there's no distinction between the church gathering and church. There's no distinction between capital C church and who it's for, meaning all believers,
right.
and the gathering that happens on a Sunday morning. There's no distinction there. They
Right.
aren't four different people.
Right. So when you originally said go into church, all are welcome to go literally into a church.
Right.
But but
But who
but
is it
but
for?
who's it for
Yes.
is the question that we're kind of
Right.
unpacking here, right?
Right.
Um and I think that you have to look at, I don't know. You got to look at that two different ways, or at least there's two different ways to look at that. The church exists for believers, but it also exists to go out and preach the word for others.
Yes.
So is it a semantics argument of who the church is for? Because it's really for everyone, right? In that sense.
So yes. But what? So if we were to go into the Bible, what would? So let's say an unbeliever walks into a church, right? Depending on what church is going to be very different
And we're
depending on
talking
where
a
they
Sunday
are,
morning.
right? On a Sunday morning,
There
yeah.
there should be a
At their
distinction.
actual service, right?
Yes,
They walk into the
yeah.
church,
Yep.
the service starts.
Okay.
What should they hear?
They should be hearing. I mean, some of the things that you've said, they should be hearing. Well, one, they should be hearing a sermon that talks about uh it's like education for like the equipping of the saints, like it says in the Bible.
Hmm.
And then um they should be hearing prayer. I mean, just things that I think happen like
Hmm.
normally in a church
Yeah.
service. For I guess as a general statement, but I also think that there should be certain distinctions between believer and non-believer in that service
Yeah.
until non-believer becomes a believer.
Sure.
So
Exactly.
I think
Yeah.
that there's nuances there. Now, I think that's where a lot of disagreement happens on where some of those nuances are and others aren't.
So so I'll use an example from the church that I attend, and I'm one of the pastors at. So we actually do communion every week,
I don't
right?
think non-believers should take communion.
Exactly. So when we do communion, what we say is we stand up there from the front. We describe what communion is every time. We do it every week, but we describe it every week as well. And we describe the purpose, what is it for, and who should be participating right now. And we say, if you are not in Christ, you have not submitted and given your life to Christ, this is not for you.
Right. I agree.
And we
I
say
agree with
that,
practice.
and we say that directly, because that's what the Bible says. So
Right.
that right there is one element of that distinction. So
But that's not to say, and I just want to be clear for those that may be listening. What we're not saying is it's an exclusionary club. It's just
right,
there's a difference, because you're the it doesn't make sense for a non-believer to take communion because they don't believe in what communion stands for.
right,
So
exactly.
it's a very sacred and holy thing to us who actually believe. So it's not that you're not doing something that prevents you from this club. It's that it just doesn't make sense that you don't hold it you don't hold it to the level of value that it should be, so therefore you shouldn't take it. The moment that you are convinced that Jesus is who he says he is, you put your faith in him, and you become born again, you become a Christian, then you're in the club, man. Like, we'll celebrate, you can take communion, you can do all this stuff. It's not a it's hard to communicate the difference in keeping someone out for tradition's sake, and then for what would that be? Values sake, maybe? How would you describe that?
Well, I think it's I'm not 100% sure what the kind of thing that you're trying to get to, but you know, if you're actively attending a church and don't believe what is being taught or spoken of at that church, you're an unbeliever, then you should just naturally expect that you're not going to be fully integrated into everything that church is doing,
Yes, that's true.
right? I mean, that should be a logical expectation on your part. If you're an unbeliever, you should here's some things you should expect. You should expect to be welcomed,
Mm-hmm.
right? You should expect to be loved.
Mm-hmm.
You should expect to be that people will come up and talk to you and engage with you and ask you how you're doing. And you should expect to be invited to family homes for dinners and things like that. And you should expect all of that. But you should also expect to be told that you're a sinner who needs to repent from your sins and come to Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And that until that takes place, you actually don't belong.
Mm-hmm.
You are welcome, but you don't fully belong. Because the dividing line that takes somebody from welcome to belonging is Jesus. Because if you don't belong to the family of God, you don't belong to the church.
Yeah, that's I do think people have a hard time with that.
Yeah.
I do, because I think that you defined that really well between. I thought that was really good. Welcomed and belonging.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times people, the reason why they have a hard time with that is because welcomed means you belong here.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of people will conflate those two things, but
Yeah.
the Bible speaks of those things differently, right? It
Do
talks
you
about,
have off the top of your head where?
welcoming the stranger. And I don't have an exact verse, but talks about welcoming the stranger. And even here in Hebrews, what we just read, who's he talking? He's talking to Christians,
Right, he is. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So he's every time you see the church and the purpose of the church given throughout Scripture, it's speaking directly to Christians,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when he says, "Don't neglect gathering together," um, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more so to continue encouraging one another through gathering together. That message is given specifically to Christians, and what he's talking about is the gathering that happens on Sunday. He's not Yes, we're supposed to have community with one another beyond that.
Right. Right.
But what he's talking about is that gathering. It's for me, it's community churches gathering.
Right.
For if he was right, let's say he was writing that to the church in Ephesus in the first century, it would be talking about those believers gathering together.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there if in Ephesus, let's say somebody was in the temple of Artemis and just bought a prostitute and they're an unbeliever, and then they walk in to the gathering of believers in Ephesus. They should be welcomed in and saying, yes, sure, you can come here. You can sit right here. You're welcome here. But all the while being welcomed, they should be met with also an understanding, and it should be communicated, not directly to them in a judgmental way by any means, but it should be understood that, you know what, I can sense that I'm welcome, and I enjoy it. I like these people. They're nice to me. They it seems like they actually genuinely love me, but I also know that they have something that I don't.
Right. Yeah, it's it's being it's very similar to the feeling you get when you go to yeah, I guess it's very similar to, let's say, you're dating a girl, you get married to that girl, and she's got two brothers and a dad, and now you're the new son-in-law, and you go over and you go hang out, and the two brothers and dad are, like, you're a part of the family, or you're about to be a part of the family. Like, let's say you're engaged to that person, but you're still not family.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
There is a distinction.
It's like two brothers and dad, or whatever the mix is. It's, they have something that you don't have yet until the wedding.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I guess a similarity.
And you can feel that, right?
Yeah, you can feel that. You can feel when you're welcomed, but this is still not your house. This is still not your family.
Right.
So
and they have traditions and things that you just have no idea about.
Right. You just kind of are there.
Ways of communicating with each other. You're just
right.
like, I don't know any of this.
I don't get it. But
yeah, that's a good example.
So why do you think in modern days that's so hard for people to practice, I guess, because I think it's easy for people to understand, and when you dive into it and you explain it and you're open to things, and understanding is one thing, but then when you go into practice, it's people don't like to do it. Why do you think that is? Do you have like a, is it just because we want people to like us? Is it that we don't actually value fully, or what's a better way to say that? Is it that we don't maybe understand, or we've been desensitized to what God is, what's a big deal to God and how He designed the church and how it should be run, but we've been desensitized to that, and it's not that big of a deal anymore. Do you have any thoughts on that?
That's
I mean, I know it's a hard one, and I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's the question. That's the question, and it's probably a combination of all the things that you just said. Like, probably some more in proportion to others, but I think it's a combination. And maybe something that it comes back to is struggling to understand the difference between the inclusive love that we're to show to everyone, and distinguishing between that and the exclusive love that we're to show to other believers. So, like, one example that I can think of. So I guess, before I get into the longer version of my answer, I guess the shorter part of the answer could just be that in some ways we lack a solid biblical foundation for what church is, and we think it can just be anything and everything that we think will reach out to other people, like that will be successful in evangelizing, and we look at those things rather than just truly a biblical foundation of what church is, and we edit it and change it because we think maybe, oh well, this version of the church was good for a time, but it's not good for now. We need to change the way we do it, and I don't think that's I don't think people have like bad motives in doing that. I just think it's a misconception of we can do it better, or our culture needs us to do it differently. Like,
I've heard more effective. I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that more phrase effective, where it's where they say like, well, that's one way to do it, but this is more effective.
Right, and I think it comes from a genuine desire to reach people,
Right.
right? I think that's probably the true.
But you're just arguing place and time.
Right, yeah. So, like, um, my answer is gonna end up being a lot longer than I thought it was,
That's
but,
all right. We got time.
yeah. So, take, for example, Billy Graham.
Yeah.
Billy Graham was not a he might have been a licensed or ordained pastor in some form, but Billy Graham was not the pastor of a church,
Okay.
right?
Right. Yep.
And Billy Graham hosted hundreds of events worldwide
Mm-hmm.
and preached. There was music, there was preaching, and there was a gathering of tons of people, and not a single event was church.
So you're saying that that's the correct place and time
Yeah.
for evangelism.
So right.
But Sunday morning
Or
is not for that.
no, I think evangelism is definitely there, right? Because you might have unbelievers who come in, and anytime you're preaching the gospel, there's an evangelistic aspect to it. And then there's also people who think or are claiming to be believers who aren't.
Right.
So
And
there
I
should
think
always be
doesn't
an
Paul
evangelistic aspect to your Sunday morning service,
right.
because how does a Christian become equipped? It's through a better understanding of the Bible, a better understanding of the gospel, and how
Right.
that's
Yeah.
communicated to people. And in communicating that, in teaching that, you're presenting the gospel, which is the power of God to save, right? Paul says in Romans 1, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it's the power of God to salvation," right? So in preaching the gospel, you're going to have people come to faith.
Do you
And so
cuz
there's an
yeah.
evangelistic aspect to that in church. But to be all about outreach, that's what Billy Graham was doing, right? That's what he was doing, traveling around the nation, but he was not the pastor of a church. This was not Billy Graham's traveling church service. This was Billy Graham Evangelistic Association doing outreaches in all of these places, but it looked a lot like a church service. Fine, it wasn't one, because it wasn't the gathering of God's people at a specific time on a Sunday morning, lifting his praises.
Yep.
Church
Yeah.
is different than what Billy Graham was doing.
And you're
Well, what
saying
Billy
that
Graham was doing was great.
yeah, and you're just saying time and place. Yeah.
Time and place.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because
But then,
even in it doesn't Paul write and I don't know where this is. But doesn't he write some maybe it is in I don't know, Hebrews maybe where in church it's for believers, but you need to be aware that there might be unbelievers in your midst. Does that ring a
yeah,
bell?
um,
I know that's
maybe
somewhere.
potentially, I can't think of anything that's worded that way, but you might be talking about one of the letters to the Corinthians where it's talking about spiritual gifts, and it's talking about how they need to, if you're speaking in tongues, there needs to be an interpreter,
Yeah.
because you sound like a gong. Basically, you're just a,
I don't
a
I don't
banging
yeah.
cymbal, and those
I don't
who
think that's what I'm talking about, but
you don't think
I
so.
know what
Okay,
you're talking about.
yeah,
Yeah, I remember that, but I don't think it was in that cluster of verses talking about spiritual gifts. But I'll have to look that up, and then maybe I'll throw it in the
yeah,
description so that people know what I'm talking about. But I
yeah,
remember that somewhere.
so, yeah. And so to answer,
Maybe I'll look it up here.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm just gonna look it up. You can go ahead.
Okay. So to come back to your other question, why is it that we might get those things? Why do we not like to put into practice that kind of thing where believers, there is a distinction between believers and unbelievers, and we basically want to, in a lot of ways, cater to unbelievers. And so what I said was that we have trouble distinguishing between the all-inclusive love that we're called to give in the greatest commandment, right? Love the Lord your God with everything you are, and then love your neighbor as yourself. That is inclusive of every person that we ever encounter. Everyone that we ever encounter, we are to love in that manner, and we're to extend that love to everybody. But then there's also an exclusive love that should only be given to other believers. And I think we can get an example of that in First John chapter 3 in verse 11. For this is the message that you have heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. And it's important to note the one another, because again, this is written by the Apostle John, one of Jesus's, original disciples, who is he writing to? He's writing to a church.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it says we should love one another, what's he talking about? He's talking about specifically the church and those who are in the body of Christ, those who are actually belonging to Christ, those who gather together to worship. That's the one another, right?
Right.
So there's love that we should extend to all people, and that's the welcoming. That's the um, that's the um, that's the welcoming in. But then there's a love that should be exclusive, and that's the belonging.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think that distinction is something that sometimes we struggle with because we do kind of conflate welcoming and belonging. And
Well, I think
so
it comes from the innate wanting, like, because as a Christian, you do have something that unbelievers don't, and I don't think there's a
exactly.
Christian that would actually disagree with that. I don't even think that's controversial to say. I would just say that the and I feel this all the time. I'm sure most Christians do. You want the unbeliever so badly to have what you have.
Hmm.
So maybe there's a motive there for conflating the two, is because we want it so bad that we'll just give it to them.
Yeah.
We'll just give it to them because but there's a process, to that needs to be um carried out. They need to come to that, be convinced on, that they're a sinner, that they need to confess, repent, believe in Jesus. Um and until they do that, there does need to be a delineation.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, you know, the John, you know, the guy writing this letter, this First John, is so the one writing for this is the message that you've heard from the beginning that we should love one another. The guy writing that was also the same guy banished to an island, meaning like basically an island prison because he was preaching the gospel.
Mhm.
The same guy that was persecuted, beaten, and I think John, or it might have been James, but I think it was John, was boiled. Like his skin was boiled alive and he
Mhm.
just didn't die and he kept preaching. So they banished him to an island where he couldn't preach anymore. And that's where he wrote the book of Revelation. But um, we've so you listed several things, and one of them was the comfort and convenience of our church. And I think while the freedom that we have to gather together whenever we feel like it, and the freedom of religion that we currently, you know, have and have had for hundreds of years in our country is generally a good thing. One negative side effect of it is that we don't view gathering together and experiencing the love of fellow believers with the same urgency that John did, and the people that were in the church with John did,
Okay.
because they're witnessing people being beaten, people being banished, people being boiled. They're seeing all of these things, this persecution that's actually happening. And in that moment, don't you think you you feel the need for the encouragement of your fellow believers,
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And we don't have that, right? We don't have that urgency, and we think that we can actually do it alone because we don't experience that type of persecution. Right? And that's not bad. Like, not experiencing persecution or actually being free is not a bad thing.
Yeah, shout
But
out to
we
the
do have to
USA.
watch the way that in our natural thoughts and in our flesh that we might actually use that freedom. Right? We might actually use it to expand our comfort rather than for the things that God would have us use it for. So I just think it's something we have to be careful about, and we need to see the love of our fellow believers and the encouragement that we get from them as absolutely essential to our life. Because there could come a time where not only is that the case, because it's always true, but where we are actually experiencing the types of things that we need that, but we don't have it anymore because we abandoned the church gathering. Does that make sense?
No, I'm with you. So I'm gonna ask you a few questions here just to push back a little bit, though. That cool?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just doing this to play the devil's advocate here because I'm sure listeners may have the question, but to some degree, doesn't the Bible talk about the apostles having some degree of unbelief? And if they were allowed to take communion, why wouldn't an unbeliever be allowed to take communion in their unbelief?
Um, well, first of all, Paul writes that you shouldn't even believers shouldn't take communion if they're struggling with specific sins or if they're struggling with certain things that are if there's something that they haven't repented of or turned away from, and talks about how people are even getting sick because they're taking communion in an unworthy manner.
Okay.
So like in that regard, the Bible is pretty clear
Pretty
that
clear on that. Yeah.
um, communion must be taken in a worthy manner. So there should be some barriers in place, and if there's even if you are a believer, if there's something in your life that is a wedge between you and Christ, that is a wedge between your fellowship with Christ, that you should back away and for a time, maybe not forever, but for a time, abstain from taking until that is resolved and that issue has come and gone. So I would say that yeah, even believers, even for believers, there's times where they shouldn't take communion.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is a believer has been made into a new creation by the death of Christ, and communion symbolizes Jesus' body being given up for
Mm-hmm.
us,
Yep.
being beaten and hung on a cross, and the juice or the wine, whatever your church uses or whatever your position is on that, is representative of his blood that he's
Mm-hmm.
poured out and spilled, and his blood that cleanses us from our sin, right? So on one side of that, only take communion in a worthy manner for everyone across the board. But on the other side of that, the Bible says that no one in the flesh can please God, right?
Right.
So automatically from that moment, from that statement, if you cannot please, if you can't please God, you can't take communion in an unworthy manner, or you can't take it in a worthy manner. Therefore, you shouldn't take it. Does that make sense? So, like an unbeliever cannot please God.
Oh, an unbeliever. I got you. I'm
Right.
with you. I'm with
Yeah.
you.
So,
Yep.
yeah, I don't
I'm
think I
with you.
said that
I'm
very
with you.
clearly
I'm with you.
when I first said it, but an
Yeah.
unbeliever is incapable of pleasing God because their sinful nature is still fully intact
Well,
and they
that's
are
yeah.
slave to their sin.
That's Romans 3. Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Well, and
um
chapter. I mean, that's for the first 3 chapters in Romans, really.
and they still have their old nature, but a believer has been given a new nature. They're a new creation, and God has awakened them and given them a new life in which now they can please God.
Right.
So then it is possible for a believer to take communion in a worthy manner.
Right.
So I think that's the distinction. Does that make sense?
No. Yeah. That's it. I think that's a good answer.
No,
And
yeah.
you,
No, yeah.
yeah. No. Yeah. You actually answered the other questions I had too, and all of that. So that's good. That's good stuff. So where do we go next, Nick? That's I don't really have
That's
anything
really all
else
I
for that.
had.
That's all I
Yeah.
have.
Can you think of any questions that you would think, okay, so let's say so I mentioned we watched this as a family movie night. I didn't really do anything, like I didn't ask any questions afterwards or anything like that to try to get the family to think of it through a lens of truth, but can you think of any appropriate questions that somebody listening to this might ask if they wanted to sit down and watch this movie with their family and to
oh
help them watch it through the lens of truth?
um
I know that putting you on the spot,
yeah,
but
it's that's a big question off the spot. I would just say, the biggest. I mean, I've been on a kick to say this to a lot of people. So if they're listening to this podcast, they might tease me about it later. But the biggest, the most pivotal. Okay, so I went to a Bible study at church, and we were going through. I think it was Romans, and we were going through Romans, and it was like a brief kind of walk through Romans kind of thing. And one of the things that I'd never heard before, and if you've heard this, that's great. I haven't, so that's cool. Is reading the word? He said was like the person teaching the class. One of our elders at church there's like through sanctification, it's like an inside out kind of process. It starts in your heart and it works your way out, kind of like making a pickle. Like the pickling process is you put the thing in the jar and then it turns from the inside out to something new.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really, really interesting. So, or at least I thought it was a good example. So the biggest thing that's really helped me, and this is going to sound really obvious, is just reading the Bible and making
Mhm.
it a priority to read, not just to uh not just to say that you read it or whatever, but read to understand. Because there's a difference between, and in our life group we even went over this. There's a difference between reading it and then those who read it and understand it. That's even written in I can't remember where. I'm gonna blank on the spot here, but I think it's in Luke. No, well, it's near the parables, so maybe Matthew. Um, but I think that reading the Bible is pivotal to always having it on your minds. Always having it in your mind and being able to see something and being sharp, keep your sword sharp, kind of thing, and being able to just be natural to see the world and stories in that way. And the more that you read
Mhm.
it, the more that you understand it, and that you can recall different verses and piece things together, because it's a search. When you're reading it, it's not, you don't just read it and can get it. I mean, you got to look at context and you got to
Mhm.
read it, and then you read something in Romans that you find in Ephesians and Thessalonians and all these different places, and then you read something in the Old Testament that is talked about in the New Testament, and they're referring back, and just how interwoven all of it is. uh that process is kind of a search. So,
Yeah.
and something does change in you when you start to understand it, and having it on ready to go all the time is the surefire way to get better at viewing stories through the lens of truth, and having it ready, at the ready to tackle life with. Is
Yeah.
that's just kind of my take. I rambled a little bit and maybe that was a little disorganized, but that would
No,
kind of
you're
be my
good.
that would be kind of my answer. I don't really have a question per se, but my encouragement would be to get into the Word and read the Bible, and read it as often as you can, because your relationship with God will grow as you read it, and it's like working a muscle. If the more you read it and the more you study, the faster and more equipped you'll be to see your faith come out into your life and view things
Yeah.
through that lens. So
So I think I got one thing for, and it really could grow into more, but just one thing. Well, maybe it's two. I don't know. You can tell me if this is one or two
with
things.
you, when you say one, usually it's five.
Yeah, maybe that's what's happening. Yeah, maybe that's the case. Um, so now thinking of this, I wish this is something I would have done. So, if you're a parent and you're going to sit down and watch Home Alone because it's Christmas time, we watch it, every year around this time. So maybe you're going to do that. So one very practical thing that you can do is read Ephesians 6, 1 through 4. So
You can't say
I'm gonna
that. You
do
can't say
what?
that. You can't take mine. I just said read the Bible, and then you said read the Bible before you watch it.
Right.
That was
But
mine.
but hey, I'm being specific.
All right, you
All
can't.
right. So
You
so here
stole
we
my
go.
you stole my answer.
So specific. Um read first read um verses 1 through 3. So, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise, that it may go well with you, and that you may live long in the land. So you read that. And what's the first part? Children, obey your parents. And then just ask. Ask your kids, how did Kevin fail? Okay. And then read verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline of in the instruction of the Lord. How did Kevin's parents fail?
Yeah, that's good. I like that.
And let the kids be the one to answer that.
I like that. That's fun. I like that. That's a good
Yeah.
exercise for sure. That's awesome. Just be careful asking your wife those questions.
Yeah.
That might not be as
Yeah,
fun.
who knows how that goes? Unpredictable.
That's unpredictable. No, we love our wives. We love our wives, but we give them a hard time. Cool. Well, I hope you guys have stuck it out this long. I don't think this is quite our longest episode, but this was definitely maybe the deepest one or the hardest one maybe to swallow. Be encouraged. There should be a delineation between believer and unbeliever, but there's a difference between being welcomed and belonging. And I guess that would be the takeaway, right, Nick? Would you add anything to that?
No, I think that's good.
Yeah. So we want to thank you guys. Check us out on social media. Check us out on YouTube for the video podcast. There's a few more graphics. You get to see our faces. If this content brings value to you wherever you're listening or viewing, subscribe, like, notification bells, rate the podcast, all those good things. And then don't be afraid to jump into the conversation. If you think we're completely wrong, jump in the comment section on
tell us.
Facebook. If you have your own opinion of something, we want to hear it. We want to
Argue with us.
Yeah, argue with us. Good discourse is always good. If you just make sure that you bring your references. That would be a good thing to add in there. I would say that. And then just know that we want you guys to be encouraged, and we appreciate all of the support. So we will see you guys next time. Nick, what's the next movie? Do you remember?
I've asked you this. Die Hard next.
I asked you this like 5 times this week. What's the order?
I mean, we can do Home Alone 2 or we can do Die Hard.
I mean, Home
Alone 2 is going to be basically the same, though.
I'm going to pick Die Hard because that's just Die Hard.
All right, we'll do Die Hard. That'll actually be our first rated R movie, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Was Fences not rated R?
I don't.
We'd have to go back and check, but it'll be Die Hard next week. So check out for that. Nick, do we have time to go live soon?
Maybe.
Okay, we'll post it on social media, on Facebook and Instagram. Maybe when we go live, I'll throw something up there. So Die Hard next week. Let us know. Watch it before next week. We want to let you guys know beforehand so that you have time to watch it and you can join the conversations. And I think that's pretty much it. We'll see you next week.